This meeting is being recorded.
Welcome back to another epidose of these crazy people that just eat meat and can't stop talking about it. It's me, Tom. I'm here, and I don't have any of the usual suspects with me. I've got a new one. I've got Neurodiva Jewelz here, and she's a member of Autistic Carnivores on Facebook, and we've had some conversations going on, if you hadn't noticed. So she want to come on and tell us all about the things she found in the rabbit hole she went down. So what was that?
Right.
Well, what's the topic du jour?
Ooh, good one. So first off, I just wanted to say how I am sort of relevant to the community is that I am autistic myself. I have two autistic children, and I have my own channel. He had mentioned Neurodiva Jewelz. I actually, I'm certified nutritionist with, what is it? I kind of delved down the rabbit hole, like he likes to say a lot. Thomas likes to say a lot of nutritional science. And I also work with neuroscientists. So this is my passion. I love sharing information with everybody, especially ones that are updated and new and things that people might not know. So yeah, let's take it from there. I believe the topic today is about Okinawans. I am Japanese. So we have to make this distinction in respect to Okinawans. Okinawans have their own culture, they have their own language, so do not mistake Okinawans as Japanese. We are a part of one whole nationality as Japanese, but within Japan, just like Hawaiians in America, they're Okinawans. So with respect to them, that's why we separate to really specifically say Okinawans in their culture with respect. Okay, so with that being said, we're talking about blue zones today.
And not the political ones.
Yeah, right. So there's a guy named Dan Buettner. I think a lot of you know who have heard that he's the one who wrote the Blue Zones book about what the best diet is. And unfortunately, he's a vegan vegetarian. He has his agenda. He's only going to take the information that he wants. And get this, people, he is a journalist. And not to say all journalists are like this, but we'll know that journalists tend to exaggerate, tend to extract what they want, and then they take it and then they just throw it on the public, right? So
we can't forget that journalism is really, it's an art form as much as they talk about what their job is supposed to be, to just report the facts. At the end of the day, if you want people to read, you've got to inject some art into it, and there's always bias in that, right?
Oh, totally, 100%. So with that being said, like, I can tell you for a fact, false on that we're plant-based, or when I say we, Okinawans are plant-based diet. And why do I say we is because I grew up with Okinawans and I grew up with what they ate. So I love them to death. Like we always go to the Okinawan festivals in Hawaii whenever we could. So I know what they ate. I can tell you for a fact, pork belly, huge in Okinawa, and it's yummy, very, very yummy. So, and they, just to back it up, is they have a pig called the agu. Agu is specifically native to Okinawa. And it has been that way for hundreds and hundreds of years. They have diminished, unfortunately, due to climate or political, like you said, political issues. But
like World War II.
And exactly, World War II was the other one. But they already actually experienced famine prior to that. So after World War II, like it was chaos. They experienced famine. There were suicide bombings because they didn't want to be captured, because the people, the government people were telling them, if you get captured, you're going to be raped, killed, blah, 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 tortured, and not all of them decided to suicide, or some of them bombs detonated, but they didn't die. So some of them ended up going to these camps to surrender. And I'm sure there was, bad stuff that happened, but at the same time, there are other parts where you have pictures of soldiers feeding little Japanese children cans of beef, cans of pork. So that's where they got spam. And spam has been a huge part of their culture. The question is, I find that the journalist who took the information from the Okinawans took it, how do I say this? Japanese and Okinawans are very, very hospitable. They will cater to you to make you feel comfortable, to make you, that's what I love about our culture. So I bet whenever whoever went to these centenarians' homes, the centenarians gave them more vegetables. They gave them more things that didn't have meat in it because they knew that person ate vegetarian, vegan, whatever. They're gonna try to be hospitable. So yeah, so I bet you anything, but probably they cook stuff with pork fat. I bet you. So I very much believe that that's how he got that information, when the truth is, well, Okinawans eat fat. They eat pork heavily, fish. It's a lot. It's in their diet a lot. But I think the American diet has crossed over to Japan a lot, to where they also believe that vegetables is more important. And that's why I can't say nowadays, are they really healthy? Centenarians now, are they living without pain, without suffering, without blah, blah? Maybe lower, but I bet you they're suffering from a lot now than they would have if they didn't adopt certain culture parts,
Yeah, well, I mean, even a broader context, when we look at like when people, I think it was when Ansel Keys was collecting his information for the 20 country study or whatever, and he, it was after World War II, and that was one of those modern examples when the Okinawan pig population was decimated by the war.
Yep.
So obviously people needed alternative food. And then when we look at like the Mediterranean in a broader context, it's much more heavily populated now than it was, because people keep multiplying, and
Yep.
people in the Mediterranean tend to eat a lot of seafood, but of course the oceans are overfished and it's harder to catch fish. And then there's a lot of economic depression, so people just can't afford as much meat, so they start eating more pasta and stuff like that. That's less expensive.
Yep.
Because you go back even in Italy and in Greece and stuff, the farther back you go, the more meat they ate. Like you said, there's a lot of pork, a lot of beef, and of course a lot of seafood. But those things have become more expensive and more difficult. We have less land and more people, and less money per person. So
if we're talking about the blue zones specifically, and we'll go down this rabbit hole I was talking to you earlier about, there are commonalities, but not necessarily the ones that are listed in Dan Buettner's blue zone stuff. Like, it's more than just community, because there's a lot of cultures that have community. Let's be honest, that's not subject to just them. And it's hard for me to say specifically, yeah, I believe that Japanese people were heavy on one diet or other. I believe they had a good balance, I would say. I think that they were very emphatic about nose to tail. They ate almost every part of the animal. So it's definitely, I would say, like you, I agree, animal-based diet. But what to me might have been a really big factor was the hormesis stressors that they experienced as they were growing up, that made them more resilient. So like the famine that they experienced, their body just went into autophagy, try to survive, the survival mode. All of that probably was one of the major factors that had them more resilient and push back like all these health issues later. But they experienced them just later. So that is a theory of mine, that it's not just the end of their lives that they're taking a look at, they're looking at now. No, sometimes it's not even about now. It's about what did they do when they're younger. And unless you're a centenarian and you watch their entire life, I don't think you can figure it out. I think it's really hard.
So, yeah, the effect that famine has on people extends to their offspring. So when people experience famine, particularly for a long period of time, there's epigenetic changes that are passed on to their offspring, so
Mhm.
that could very well have a lot to do with it. I know this is kind of a little off the page, but when I was younger, my big passion was archery, and I was in the junior Olympic archery program. I went to Colorado Springs to train, and they brought in a Bulgarian weightlifting coach, and he was talking about the Soviet program to select weightlifters. And he was talking about how they would go to the tobacco regions because the kids there got up really early in the morning and worked in the cold, damp air to
Yeah.
harvest tobacco leaves. And these kids had a tremendous hormone profile. They were short and stocky and really burly. And so they would go there to find future weightlifters for the glory of the Soviet Union. So it's interesting
Wow.
that they had picked up on the stressors of that region, had an epigenetic influence that was
Yep.
sort of ideal for certain types of athletes. So
Yep. Yep.
anyways, just an
That's
example.
really,
Yeah.
no, that's a great example because and that's relevant because to me, instead of concentrating on only the blue zones, I think what would actually help to figure out the blue zone is if you look at the people who are centenarians that are living in places that are heavily with poor diet, heavily with all these terrible things, but yet survive with a long lifespan. Why is that? If you can narrow it down to that one thing, that would probably explain why the blue zones are the way they are. Like, you know what I mean? Like to me, that the vision is too small. It has to be more, I think.
Well, there's a lot that's been written to sort of debunk the blue zone thing. And it seems like people have poked so many holes in it that it's hard to tell
Yeah,
where exactly the
right,
truth is. Yeah, for sure.
right. I totally agree 100%. Like, I think in the blue zones, people are again like they don't know the person's full life, and even the people centenarians can't remember much of it. They don't. There's so much trauma. There's so much, a lot of things going on. So to know exactly what worked, sorry, we don't have that technology. So that's the ultimate truth. But there are things that we know now that still can help us live a healthier life. And I do believe that carnivore and at least a lower carb lifestyle, it's funny because why would Okinawans diet work for them to live a long life, but not for necessarily for other people? I feel like there's a reason for that. I think that Okinawans typically have metabolic health more so than anywhere else. We've damaged ourselves so much. I include myself as an American because I ate cereals, I ate all these kinds of things, unhealthy processed foods growing up. I had Pop Tarts. So I
Well,
think
let's start at the beginning. What about, baby formula? A lot of it's,
oh, right.
made from processed milk or soy or
Yep,
whatever. And then you get into
exactly.
baby foods. And this is another kind of off the page thing, but my mom told me that when I was a kid, she would feed me the strained carrots or whatever, the baby food,
Oh, that's lovely.
and I would turn orange, right?
The carotene. Yep,
Yeah.
the carotene.
So and it's like, well, if we were supposed to eat all those carrots, and a lot of people would be orange, not everybody, because I mean, the
Yeah,
beta carotene in the carrots uh,
yep,
isn't actual vitamin A, right? It's two retinol molecules that are joined together,
yep,
and
exactly.
only half the population of the planet can actually convert any of that beta carotene into retinol. So the beta carotene is useless, and if it builds up in your system and turns you orange, it's clearly not beneficial, right?
That is Oompa Loompa.
Yeah, you start looking like an Oompa Loompa. And
That is
uh out of the half of the population that can convert some of that beta carotene into retinol, it's somewhere between 1% and 50% of it, right? So it's not really
oh,
a very efficient source of retinol, which is actual
no,
the vitamin A, the bioavailable vitamin
yep,
A. So
I agree. I mean, like, I know that, well, I know the divergent thing. Let's go. If we're going back to what we're talking about, like, um, I I don't think Okinawan diet would work for most of us who have been on this processed diet for too long. It would, you know what I mean? You'd have to kind of go back to basics almost. Go back to basics. Our base diet, what is it? It's been proven that we are, I don't want to say carnivore, but we were a carnivore for the
Mm,
most part of our existence.
mhm,
So we would thrive on that.
mhm.
And I think eventually when you become more metabolically healthy, I believe you can start adding some things back into your diet. I mean, that's for me. I am not dogmatic about one diet is the diet. I do, however, do believe that our base diet is meat. We need to have it. That was the only thing available all year round. That's logical. That makes sense. You know, I'm sorry. Try finding like, I
Yeah,
don't
I,
know.
I think the archaeological evidence, and then of course the stable isotope evidence for this is it's all hard science, right? It's
Yeah,
repeatable science. So, and we talk a lot about eating land mammals like mammoths and stuff like that, and but also along the coast we have um habituation sites all along the coast, and people left massive piles of shellfish remnants, fish hooks, harpoons,
yep. Hmm.
and so on. So generation after generation, they not only ate the fish and the shellfish, but they ate the marine mammals, the seals, the walrus, whatever they could get their hands on. And for somehow they were able to go deep sea fishing long before anybody imagined. They were making plummets to carry the line down and hooks and
Wow.
everything. And they made these things out of stone, so we still have them. And of
Yeah.
course, they're buried in layer after layer in habituation sites where people came and went seasonally for thousands of years, right? So their debris
Yeah.
piled up and was preserved. And we have all these sort of mysterious people that were getting around in boats somehow, especially along the coast and the kelp patches, like where the fish and the marine life live. They would just go from one to the other, eating the marine life and then coming
Mhm.
on shore. So independent of the people that lived in the interior, where you would find things like mammoths and mastodons and all that megafauna, you had coastal people. And I think that's why when we look at the haplotype groups and genetics, that the pathways of the genes are so complicated, is because you had people constantly roaming about for one reason or another, mixing their genes and
Yeah.
presumably mixing their diets, right?
Yep. I agree.
So,
I agree with that. I mean, I believe 100% that we're circadian beings. On top of that, what you just mentioned, we're also circadian beings. We followed the season. We didn't back then. We didn't really have, before 12,000 years ago. We didn't have agriculture. We
right.
just, whatever was available, we had to hunt. And sorry, we didn't always have berries. We didn't always have bananas available.
Hmm.
So, and just like how we cannot figure out yet what makes us live longer, we still don't exactly know what happened to us, why we became really smart. There's only theories, and
Hmm.
and just like this, we only have a theory of how long we can live. So don't I wouldn't it's hard to say what is. That's why it's hard to be dogmatic about one thing or another. And I love Jack Cruz. Like, I think his information is great. But he's dogmatic about what he says. You only need sun. Basically, sun is the best thing.
Mm.
And that's kind of true. But like, there's more to it than just that.
Well,
So
there's great theories. Like, we know that it seemed like before we were prodigious hunters, we ate a lot of leftovers, right? So we're eating bone marrow and brain out of because most predators don't eat the brains or the bone marrow. They don't crack bones, they don't crack skulls. There's only a few exceptions in natures of other animals that do it. And back to the archaeology, we clearly see the progression from just using basic hammerstones to somewhere in
yep,
there, somebody realized those little chips of stone that came off the hammerstones that were sharp were great implements for scraping hides and cutting things. And then that develops into things like spearheads and stuff like that. And if anybody has any doubt about us hunting mammoths in antiquity, that all you have to do is there's lots of examples of spearheads and stuff like that stuck in mammoth bone, or large gashes in the bone created by stone tools. So, and we left that evidence all over the world,
Right?
yeah,
That
everywhere.
boggles my mind. How do you omit something like that and say, no, we were vegetarians, we ate plants all day?
I pointed it
Really?
I pointed it out a few times, but they've been doing a lot of excavation, I think mostly for building projects in Mexico, and they keep coming across these mammoth traps. So they're digging a footing or whatever for a building, and they're like, oh, this pit's full of mammoth bones. And they realized it was a trap, and people would steer the mammoths down a path, and boom, they'd fall in a hole, and then they'd
All
jump
right.
in and eat
Yeah.
them, and then another one
Right.
fall on top of it, and they'd eat that one. So and the world is covered with these structures called kites. They build them both on the coast, where they're basically like a system that traps the fish when the tide comes in, but they also
Yeah.
built them inland so that they would drive, whatever, antelope or whatever, into like a valley, as it were. And they've blocked it off so that all these animals funnel in there, and then they're trapped in like a giant corral, and
Smart.
then they're easy to hunt. So that, of course, probably came later when the megafauna were gone. We're trapping smaller animals and more fish on a larger scale. But the archaeological evidence is everywhere. It's
Right.
absolutely all over the planet.
And it's solid. It's
It's
not
very
like
solid.
maybe it just so happened there's a thing that looks like a shape of an arrow. No. I'm pretty sure they use that for something larger or for a
Yeah,
purpose of hunting.
Justin just sent me an arrowhead that came from the Saudi Arabian desert, and it's from the Pleistocene. So, it's an ice age arrowhead from, what is now a desert. So is
Mhm.
everywhere.
Yep. Yep. Um, but yeah, so I really enjoyed this topic because I it's so interesting. For the longest of time, I believe that we were omnivores, and it's still a little bit, there's a gray area, but like I can see why we would be considered carnivores mostly, because
Mhm.
that's was an ice age. That makes sense. There's a timeline. You can see it. There's evidence of frozen stuff, and you can, what our findings were. People are not stupid nowadays. We have the technology to extract all these things now. So you can keep arguing and you wish we eat all, just plants all day, but
Well,
um,
I think people don't realize how little edible plants were available,
mhm.
15,000 years ago. There was very little that wasn't overtly toxic to human beings. You couldn't just walk around
Oh,
picking berries and digging up roots or tubers all day, because even though all wild potatoes are toxic to human beings. So you have to figure out how to detoxify the potato. And the same thing, because a lot of people eat cassava, or the tuber that they base tapioca on,
yeah,
but it also has to be detoxified, you know
right. By fermentation or cooking, right?
yeah. So
That makes
and they weren't available on a large scale. They're available on a large scale because we've been farming them for 5-10,000 years now. But
right,
to
right.
find that stuff in nature is, you're just scavenging a little here and there, and then you have to be able to detoxify it. So that stuff clearly entered our diet much later, you know
Yep, I agree with that. I think also though, um, those who are metabolically healthy can handle a little bit of plant toxicity. They can
Sure.
handle it. Their body is free of all their pesticides, all these chemicals that are constantly all around us. So if you look at the places like the Sardinians and Okinawans, back then they really didn't have a lot of industrial revolution happening in that time. It was still very rural. Um, so that's why that's why my thinking is, I don't think you can apply what they eat now or within the last 20 years towards longevity. I bet you anything, it's not going to be the same effect. You just can't. But now it's overconsumption of these things. Your body's overly toxic, and that's why a lot of people. I believe I was listening to an interview with Dr. Chafee, and I don't remember this lady's name, but she was she studied heavily on plant toxicity, And she had said that those who are on carnivore and experience these really terrible, like adverse side effects, or they just don't feel good on the diet anymore, is because now all the toxic chemicals like the oxalates are starting to leach out, are starting to come out of wherever it's stored. And
Right.
that makes a lot of sense to me. But I don't know if it's a fact. I would love to have that, where she has that source of information, because she didn't source it, so I don't know how to find it.
Yeah, that's a rabbit hole we could go down probably together. There was some people, it was Elliot Overton had talked about this a while back, and then it was Susan Atkins and somebody else had done some research on it, and I actually spoke to the woman who actually did the original research on autistic people. And because autistic people for some reason tend to have higher levels of oxalates, just like mercury and stuff like that. And it's, some people look at that, oh, that's the obvious cause of autism. And some people look at it as, well, there's probably some impediment to eliminating those things. And we know in particular with oxalates that the body can't eliminate excess oxalates while it's doing other processes. So you need to pause the other processes, which are a higher priority. And that is one of the things that the carnivore diet, as many people view it as an elimination diet, allows those processes to continue. So what happens is people who, the most common place that we find oxalate stored is in the kidney, right, as a kidney stone. So the body takes oxalic acid and combines it with calcium to neutralize it, and then it stores it in the kidney. And then people go on carnivore, and their body's like, oh, well, we can finally get rid of this oxalate, so let's start breaking up these kidney stones. And the next thing you know, they're like, oh, my kidneys are killing me, so
that's really interesting. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
It can also be stored in the joints, and it causes gout-like symptoms in the feet. And then some people seem to actually have the oxalate crystals come out in their tears and sometimes their skin and stuff like that. If you go online and want to horrify yourself, you can see all these pictures of oxalate crystals in people.
Just to entertain myself, I will do that.
Yeah, because they found giant oxalate crystals in people's brains and hearts and all kinds of scary things. So those are the extreme cases, of course.
Oh, wow.
I think even the Weston A. Price book, I don't have a handy. I think there's some pictures in there. So
that's great. Yeah, just for entertainment value, I think I'm going to do that and gross myself out. Speaking of autism, that's a big part of my life. This might be interesting. So I was diagnosed as a kid with ADHD. Back in those days, they didn't know what autism was. So they underdiagnosed me. But when I got older, in early adulthood, I was diagnosed with Asperger's. But now it's no longer called Asperger's. So I'm just on the spectrum. But then I recently, like about 2 months ago, I took an updated test. So they check your intelligence, the IQ test, and then they also do a psychological survey. And apparently, they could not tell that I was autistic anymore. They which is interesting to me, because that's a DNA thing, and I should still be autistic regardless of the external, what you see here. So that's really interesting. I found out that I'm much more intelligent than I thought I was. So that's another plus. But really, I don't have a lot of faith in psychologists. So I think those of you who believe that you're still autistic, you're autistic, honey. You're just it's in your DNA. There's nothing you can do to change that part, unfortunately. But unfortunately, because we are who we are, and I'm very much an advocate of, there's the positive sides of us being autistic. We have talents that it's very rare for anybody else to have. The unfortunate side is the side effects of being so brilliant, of having all these wonderful parts of being autistic. We do have side effects of anxiety, all these like mental health issues. And if the thing is, if we were to fix that part, and through carnivore and through our environment, epigenetics, we probably can fix all those areas. And guess what? You'd be like an amazing person, an amazing a 2.0, let's just say that, human 2.0. That's what I have on my channel. I'm like, I call autistic people actually humans 2.0.
Yeah, I mean that's a big topic. I mean, you've got the whole crowd that's like, autism is not something that needs to be fixed. It's wrong to try and cure us, and then you've got the people that are severely debilitated and never be self-sufficient and just really struggle every day. They struggle to communicate. A lot of times you have a person with very advanced intellect, but they're trapped in a body that doesn't allow them to communicate. And
Right.
so, I try and tell people, well, look, this is just an opportunity. We start with the basic things. A lot of people on the spectrum have digestive issues that are rather
Yeah.
severe. At least the discomfort and the preoccupation with the difficulty is taxing by itself. And so when you alleviate that, you free up more resources to do things like communicate.
Yep.
And then I'm sure you've heard this too. It's like it's very rare for somebody's IQ score to change over time.
Mhm.
But then, like the example you just cited, that there was a change. Did you have a specific number in IQ points that changed or something like that? Or
I didn't take one as a kid,
Mm,
but I believe my disability, I tend to. So before I used to be more socially awkward. I've learned through each instance, whenever I had, and so I, I think I was able to mask, and then it became a habit. But
mm,
I think when it came to IQ, I believe I scored lower just because my understanding, when I would read something, I had a difficulty in comprehension, reading comprehension, even oral comprehension. Like for some reason, it was difficult for me. But at some point, something clicked in my brain, and then all of a sudden, I was able to read something and comprehend it much better. I still struggle with like directions. When you have to put together some shelf. No, I just need
mm.
pictures. Pictures. Like I'll be fine. But written word is a difficult part of me. But I scored apparently the quote unquote superior level. So I don't know what happened, but I do contribute this, and this is just my theory, that I fasted, not on purpose, back in high school, towards like the whole entire last 2 years of my high school.
Hmm,
And then after that, I went on an Atkins diet early
hmm.
on in my 20s. So I really think my brain had gone through major repairs during that time to have changed so much in such a short amount of time.
Mhm.
So that's why I'm so I strongly believe in the meat-based diet. Definitely a meat heavy
Yeah,
diet.
it might be a bit of a stretch to sort of associate this with a young adult or teenager or an adult, but there are a number of studies that show that the higher the A1C value or hemoglobin A1C score is for a delivering mother, and the lower the omega-3 fatty acid level is, the more likely that the child is to present with autistic symptoms. So we
Yeah.
have both a lack of essential fatty acid and high levels of blood glucose that, it's repeatable science. We may not specifically understand the exact mechanisms at work there, but the studies show that that high A1C value and low omega-3, statistically much more likely to have an autistic child or a more severely autistic child. And I think that's where it is. It's like, because people are on a spectrum, because I think primarily, obviously, the brain is growing a lot when people are very young. Um, the influences there are, long lived, right? Because you're changing the actual physical structure of the brain as it's developing. But even as an adult, I think nutrition in particular can play a role on how efficiently brain, however developed, works, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And we
I
can't ignore anxiety and depression, right? Because that's rampant in the autistic community, right?
Yep. Oh, I'm so sorry. Gosh,
No
I
worries,
apologize.
happens all the
Um,
time.
I want to add on to that because that's a brilliant, brilliant assessment. Because then that to me that's fact because there it's so much it's so much written in the literature. Like there's proof, and I've had videos about this um, in PubMed that actually autistic people have insulin resistance in the brain. It that makes sense of why when we eat something we got to be more careful because it our brain clearly doesn't work well with high carbohydrate foods, high, we should be more on a lower carb diet. I think I believe that's really what helped me. And studies show besides what you had said, it's also could be it's also vitamin D, they're saying too. It's almost a vitamin D disorder. Um, and it's funny because I was in Hawaii and my first child who is autistic, he's moderate to I don't know if you diagnose him, he's moderate to high. Those who respectively in the community, he just has more support needs. Um, he, I was not out in the sun that much, even though I was in Hawaii. I'm sorry, not a beachgoer. So I walked maybe a block around my area, but like with an umbrella, with sunscreen, with you know what I mean. So
Yeah.
I probably did not get enough sun, and that would make a lot of sense to me. He was natural birth and everything, so I'm sure he got my gut bacteria, but that would mean question: how well was my digestive system and what gut bacteria that I had? So I totally agree with you what you say about all of that. The A1C, that just makes so much sense to me.
Yeah, I mean there's a lot to it. I mean, like you talked about the genetic component because and we do see clearly in genetic lines it's more prevalent, but obviously the diet has a lot to do with it. And so if the diet has a lot to do with it, it's not much of a stretch to say that other environmental factors could also contribute. And particularly when the brain is developing, it's really a matter of how divergent the pathways or the brain structures are, and we can only imagine how many factors influence that. We're all painfully aware of this debate between whether vaccines cause autism or not, and whether they don't. And on one hand, there's a book by Dr. Timothy Hotez. He's a virologist who develops vaccines, and his book is something like vaccines did not cause my daughter Rachel's autism. And then you have something that's sort of the polar opposite by J.B. Handley. I wish I could remember the name of it. But anyways, on one hand, you have a scientist who develops vaccines and says, no, the vaccine didn't cause my child's autism. And then you have parents who are just like, well, my child got vaccinated and their autistic like symptoms appeared. Maybe the child was young enough to really not know where on the spectrum they were, but I think it's clearly related to immune system reaction. So,
Mm, that's
everybody's
a good
focused on just mercury or, whatever it is. But the truth
right,
is all the vaccines have an adjuvant in them that stimulates the immune system. And then you're putting in some sort of pathogen or pseudopathogen to help the immune system recognize that danger, right? And
right,
so you're basically creating a situation in the body where the immune system is very stimulated.
right,
And I don't think it's that much of a stretch to say that overstimulation of the immune system could very well have an impact on brain development, right, in a growing child.
right. I mean, I would never say, wouldn't put it past that because, well, my
Mm.
son was not vaccinated. However, he did get the vitamin K shot, which supposedly only has vitamin K and something else, but he's still autistic. So I I think it could also have been something that was transferred from the mother as far as toxicity buildup from the mother from vaccines as well. Because I did get vaccines. I got the tetanus shot. I got, you know what I mean? And I could have passed it on to my kid, the toxicity. So I mean, that could probably that's why I would not say no, but I
Yeah, and
I
I
no.
I think to some degree, really what they need is just to develop safer vaccines and more tests for people that have strong immunological responses to these things. And, they should consider, like kids that already have autoimmune disease when they're little, like maybe they have eczema or psoriasis or whatever, really bad allergies. They should probably space out the immunizations, because
Yep.
when you elicit a really strong, I mean, it's just accepted that a certain number of people are going to be harmed by the vaccines, because you don't really
Yep.
know who's going to have a severe reaction, right? You could have
Yeah.
anaphylaxis, or you could have Guillain-Barré syndrome or whatever, that we know that a small segment of this population is going to have those type of reactions. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
not a stretch in my mind to say that, well, maybe it just made the autistic symptoms work. Maybe it altered the development of the brain or the nervous system in some way.
Yep.
So,
Well, it does affect neurologically. Like the chemicals in there are neurological. I forgot what they call it. It does affect it has neurological symptoms if it adversely reacts with you. That's a fact. It is. Um, I believe that accumulatively, you know, if we're bombarded with that toxin and this toxin and pollution and all these kind of things, it's all going to build up. There's nowhere it's going to leave so quickly. Your body has to work so hard to get rid of all of this stuff. And people says, "Oh, I only have one cheat day, honey." That one cheat day still it accumulates in the body. You haven't even gotten rid of yesterday's pollution. So I'm just saying,
mhm.
like it accumulates. So I would not put it past. I think they really, like you said, I agree 100%. Come on, go back in the I forgot when it was, but back in the days where they didn't put all that mercury, they didn't put all the formaldehyde. They had just had purely the vaccine itself. What is it? The
The
not
culture.
pathogen. What is it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm,
the thing itself.
mhm.
To the yeah, I forgot what they call it. Inoculation in a sense, like,
Right.
but and sorry, I can't find the word in my brain right now. But yeah, I do have to go. I apologize. I have a
No
photo shoot
worries.
coming up,
Yeah.
but
No worries.
I had a great time.
Yeah.
I love to do this again.
I'd love
I
to
hope
too.
I didn't divulge too much. I
No, you
get
did
ADHD.
great. And people are going to love the content.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
All right.
When are you thinking? Would you what are you gonna what is it? Just go as is, or would you like me to edit, or however you want me to
Oh,
do
I
it?
usually just go as it was. I think everything went really well. So yeah, I don't have any plans to edit it. I make available a copy to you. You could put it up on your channel as you see fit. You can edit it if
Oh,
you
nice.
like. Yeah, that's
Oh, cool, cool.
entirely up to you.
Oh, I would love that. Oh, thank you so much. Sorry if I kind of get that edit part. You gotta skip that part.
That's fine. So,
All right. Well,
but thanks for
definitely.
coming. It was great chatting
All
with
right.
you, and we'll definitely
You
see
too.
you online.
Got it.
Everybody
Take
out
care.
there, eat some meat, feel better, and whatever you
Eat
do,
some meat. Lots of it.
don't fall down that carpal.